who better to ring in the new year but another Congressman-Elect for several more hours, we can still call him that, Scott Taylor, representing a Republican representing District 2. He'll be replacing Scotty Ridgel. That's all we're going to say about it. We're excited that he's there, very excited, and he's going to get sworn in today sometime, we understand, between 12 and 5 o'clock as the clock rings, I guess. We'll see how it turns out. Joining us now, without further ado, Scott Taylor, about to be sworn in as Congressman. Scott, good to have you with us.
John, good morning. Happy New Year to you and your folks out there listening. It's great to be with you as always.
Now, look, this has got to be an exciting day. We just had Tom Garrett on a few moments ago. I mean, you guys worked really hard to get in the position that you're in, so it's going to be an exciting day getting sworn in as United States Congressman, a unique opportunity. Look, there's only 435 congressional representatives in all of America. It's tougher odds than playing for the NBA, if you really think about it. So it's good to have you there. Are you excited?
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm up here with my family. There's a lot of folks coming up here to watch the swearing in. You know, Tom Garrett, great guy. He's right across the hall from me. We have a good hall with a lot of good people. We're excited. I'm ready to get to work. It's an honor and humbling. And look, I know that I represent a district that has more military and veterans than anyone in the nation, and that is a huge responsibility. It's not something that I take lightly, and I'm just ready to get to work, man, for sure. I'm definitely excited.
Let's get into some of the issues. New Year's Eve, we were talking about this earlier today. Another ISIS radical Muslim terrorist attack in Istanbul, 39 people dead. ISIS taking responsibility for that. Here's what's concerning me, and I want to get your take. If this happened 24 months ago, it had been all over the news for a week. It's almost like we're getting desensitized. I mean, it happened. It was on the news one day. Then we're on to football, everything else. And that was kind of the end of it. Now ISIS taking responsibility for that in retaliation for what they say is the Turkish government's involvement in the Syria campaign. You know, you're going to Congress. I mean, people are looking at this and they got to be saying, you know, this is going to come to America if we don't stop it. What are your thoughts on that whole thing, Congressman?
Well, it's two parts, I think. I mean, when you look at Turkey's involvement in Syria and what I'm worried about in Syria is, unlike other conflicts, even during the Cold War when you had, superpowers via proxies would be in conflict in different nations around the world. In Syria, what's different about that is, I mean, you have the Russians, you have the Turks, you have America, you have Iran, you have other various interests that actually have boots on the ground and fighting, and there's a huge potential for flashpoint and much greater conflict in Syria itself that could just explode out of control, and that really worries me. But when you when you look at the ISIS itself and attacks that could potentially be here in America and other places around the world, in the West especially, is you have a decentralized network group, and that it's growing exponentially and has the ability to grow exponentially because of networks. Just really quickly, John, when you look at, in 1997, the world's largest and most powerful computer was the size of a tennis court. The electricity to take to power it could power 800 homes. Fast forward to 2005, the equivalent to that was a Sony PlayStation. So why I say that is, nowadays, an individual can have the computing power of the world's strongest computer just less than 20 years ago. And what that means is any individual anywhere is potentially vulnerable to any individual anywhere. And when you have the technology that we have today and the networks, that's very dangerous, obviously. So I think it's a three-part strategy, and I know we don't have time to get into it, but you have to counter an ideology of radical Islamic terrorism. You have to disrupt networks, and you have to kill bad guys in general. But unless you deal with that network, unless you deal with that ideology, it's going to continue to grow exponentially. And that's not a fear tactic. That's just what's happening.
Well, the other thing is now ISIS is just taking credit for all of these things, and we don't know the extent of these are lone wolves or if they're inspired by something. Look, over the holidays,
but that's the network, right? That's right. The network that enables like-minded individuals to connect, just like you would if you were a stamp collector, to connect with somebody in Russia who's a stamp collector. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the network, and that's something that we have to, leaders, policy leaders, military leaders, we have to think differently. We're in a whole different world. a whole different world now. The threats, that network and that computing power poses tremendous opportunities, but also great challenges.
Scott, let's get to this. Over the holidays, we heard that 9 individuals were arrested by the FBI and Department of Homeland Security in Northern Virginia, accused by our government of being potential operatives for ISIS. This is in Northern Virginia. What's the deal here?
Yeah, again, I mean, it goes back to what we were just talking about. You have the ability to touch anybody anywhere who may already subscribe to your ideology or can be easily susceptible to being radicalized and counter there. And unless we start dealing with counter an ideology, which I think that, with the new Trump administration, you have a leader who is not scared to call it what it is and deal with it head on and deal with the ideology, much like Reagan did with communism. And until we start doing that, you're going to see more problems. And I think you will still see more problems. But I think that will start to change with the new administration. We have to put procedures in place that allow for communication across not just law enforcement but also military. We have to look at that and revisit that as well too, because a lot of times, you have for example, you might have a Somali radical who's in Mogadishu, who's connecting with someone here right in Northern Virginia and radicalizing him. So you might have military special operations who are following somebody in Somalia, and they find the communications and they see that it's going to someone in Northern Virginia. Well, they have to be able to communicate with U.S. law enforcement as well too, to be able to monitor those folks and figure out what's going on. So, that's something that needs to be looked at in terms of, number one, do we have the ability to deconflict there, and do we have the ability to communicate across agencies, and is that happening, or is there bureaucracy that's basically stopping that from happening well too? At the same time, John, we have to be always cognizant of our liberties, so that we don't have fear mongering that causes too big of a security state that's quite frankly counterproductive anyway.
Right.
But
exactly.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, but that's what we have to look at those types of things to make sure that we're being as effective and as efficient as possible here in the homeland, as well as overseas, because they obviously are interconnected now in this new world.
Now, Scott, staff-wise, you took Scotty Weldon up there he'll be in Washington on your staff, right?
I did, yeah. Scott's going to be up there doing the communications, and he's also going to be our political director. We kept Congressman Ridgel's chief of staff, John Thomas, who's been on the Hill for like 10 years, knows everybody, knows where the bathrooms are. So we have a good continuity, and we won't skip a beat.
All right, it's going to be interesting. Let's get to President Obama over the weekend expelling 35 Russian diplomats, accusing them of meddling in the U.S. election. He's got 17 days left in his administration. He's expelling people. What did you make of this?
There's a couple things that here. Number one, let me preface this by saying there has been nothing that has contributed to a Russian resurgence more than the policies of this administration over the past 8 years. So it's dumbfounding that they would start to try to have a heavy hand now a month before he leaves office. The same thing with Israel, right? I think it's quite frankly. Let me get to that in a second, but let me stay with your topic. So, if in fact there is Russian meddling, if in fact they've done those things, then yes, you have to have a response, no doubt about it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this isn't more political, and I think that it's been clouded by politics. But I will say, and I'll back the president up 100%. If in fact there is proof, and let me tell you, with cyber warfare and cyber crimes, it's extremely hard to attribute where the source came from. So could there potentially be Russian hackers in Russia that were not dictated to by the Kremlin? Yeah, that's possible too. There's a lot of hackers in Russia as well too. I just don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But if the president has information, like real hardcore evidence that yes, this is attributed to Russia, then yes, we do have to respond. At the same time, I think that what you're seeing here with Russia and what you're also seeing with Israel and the president is Israel specifically. I think it's actually cowardly. I mean, you've had 8 years, and 1 month before you leave office, you start causing havoc for them. You could have done this way before then. So, but it troubles me that the president is trying to take these big steps internationally and causing friction internationally at the last moment. If you had these issues, you could have done it the whole time, and you've been so weak and feckless on policy. All this does is create problems for the incoming administration. I think that's the wrong thing to do.
I think it is the wrong thing to do when you've only got 18, 17 days left in your administration and your legacy. And it does seem like he did this to make a statement, or to maybe, as Kellyanne Conway, chief counselor to the president, said, to get Trump boxed in. Let's get to Israel. You went there a couple weeks ago. You went with Congressman Dave Pratt. When you were there, you called Congressman-Elect Taylor for moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now, this is, as you know, is a very controversial topic. You went to Israel and then made that statement of support for moving the embassy. Why?
Because Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, period. So if we're recognizing Israel as a nation state, that's what they said their capital is. That's what it is, period. So we already have a consulate there. We have an embassy in Tel Aviv. Just switch them. I think there's a couple things. Number one, I think it's very cowardly of the administration to do what they did with the UN, especially utilizing temporary members like Venezuela and Senegal, who, of course, have probably never been to Israel and have no idea about the West Bank and Judea, Samaria, and the two-state solution. And look at Venezuela. Look at some headlines from Venezuela. I think that's embarrassing and disrespectful. But I think that we should have the embassy in Jerusalem. I think that when you hear the two-state solution, and we talked about this before, I think it's very misleading, because in the West Bank, it's not like here's your side, here's my side. The Arab villages and Jewish villages are like right next to each other, and they're interconnected. And I don't understand how there would be a two-state solution from a practical standpoint. But anyways, I think, back to your question, they say the capital is Jerusalem. They are a sovereign nation. We recognize them. Why shouldn't it be in there?
Why didn't the Obama administration veto the UN resolution for a two-state solution? They have veto power. They could have simply vetoed it, and that would have been the end of it. Again, they did that with 16 days remaining. What was their thinking there?
Well, the Obama and the administration there, they don't like Israel. They have done things, to be fair. They've given military aid to Israel. I'm not sure if it's in today's terms more than any other administration. I'm not sure if that's the truth, but they have given military aid. But at the same time, they've caused more security risk and challenges for Israel than probably any other administration as well, too, with the Iran deal, which, of course, has given Iran tons of money to continue funding proxies, which are basically on three sides of Israel. And of course, the Syrian war. There's huge problems there, so Israel needed that. But other administrations, of course, we've protected Israel for a long time now. This president, I think, doesn't want to do that anymore, and I think that he wants to have an engagement with no preconditions with Iran, which is very flawed, very, very flawed. And he has done so in the last month, where it wouldn't hurt him that much politically, because he has nothing to lose. I personally think that's very cowardly. If he had these thought processes all along, he should have done it years ago.
President-elect Trump has threatened to shake up the UN, up to including defunding it. This is saber-rattling. We've heard this before. It never happens. We continue to fund them, and then I think Trump said that they go out to dinner and they have nice chats, and they're basically worthless. Is he on the right track?
I don't think he's misguided wholly. No, I don't. There are some things with the UN and international norms that's good for the world, for sure. And past presidents, as you said, have threatened to cut funding, and then they've made reforms with that threat. But the reality is, yes, it is an organization that don't do much of anything at the moment, and we bear most of the cost. And again, I think it's very cowardly and horrible and disrespectful that this president has used the UN for two things. One, to legitimize the Iran deal, and two, to delegitimize Israel, which is extremely flawed and stupid. But I don't think that the president is on the wrong track in terms of wanting to make sure that the UN actually has some validity and actually does something. They don't really do much. They're pretty toothless.
Okay, I've only got about a half a minute remaining. Congressman-elect Scott Taylor getting sworn in today. What do you think is going to be your first vote?
I think Obamacare is the first thing that's coming up.
Right.
I don't know if that's the first vote. There might be some procedural stuff. I mean, there's going to be the leadership stuff, but the first major vote that's going to affect the lives of everybody in America, I believe, is going to be the defunding of Obamacare.
And so Republicans have to find an alternative for that, because one of the issues they've got now, I don't know the number, but upwards of over 12 million people that have insurance, that didn't have insurance, that are being subsidized by the government. It's tough to just tell 12 million people they're out. You guys are going to have to figure that out, right?
There's no doubt, John. We're going to have to have a replacement. We have to. There has to be a transition time, obviously, because of exactly what you just said. There are some things that should remain, and then there's also some things that have to be changed immediately. But I think we should not be defending mediocrity. We should do things that actually reduce the cost of health care for the people that are out there and get more people access to care. And those are the type of things that I want to support. And removing bureaucracy and allowing for innovations to be able to do that and drive down costs. Those are the types of things that I want to see and I want to support. But you're right. We have got to have a replacement that works for the American people.
Okay, that's going to be it. We're out of time. We want to thank Congressman-Elect, soon to be in a few hours, Congressman Scott Taylor, Republican from the 2nd District of Virginia. Congressman, I'll be up there in a couple weeks. I'll stop in. Good to have you with us, sir. And congratulations.
You're welcome, brother. Thank you, guys. Have a happy New Year.